anything. I'm talking about you.
This is my convention. What is happening to it?
Defending against the modern-day downgrade as we head downhill at breakneck speed. Speaking truth, exposing the lies. This is Polemics Report.
You know why you do it. You don't do it because you get paid well. You don't do it because men love you. You do it because you love men, and because more than that, you want to honor God.
From a location somewhere in the eastern Montana prairie, this is your host, J.D. Hall.
Hello, and you're listening to Polemics Report for March 10, 2022. This is your host, J.D. Hall. This is the program we hope will be glorifying to God, convicting to sinners, and edifying to the saints. The largest and furthest reaching polemics podcast in the world. Check us out at protestia.com. This program is brought to you by our patron supporters. You might be a dirty freeloader who's listening to this program on a free Bible thumping wingnut RSS feed like iTunes or Spotify or Podbean. But this program is brought to you by our hundreds of committed patron supporters who give $5.95 a month to get the entire podcast of everything that we talk about and other free stuff and direct communique with yours truly. There are also other levels of patronage, $19.95 a month to join the Bulldogmatic Bible Study, the $49.95 a month to get a book in the mail every single month. Other benefits, join us on Patreon, Pulpit and Pen on Patreon. That said, this is a program that is for the edification of the local church. It is not designed for Christians to develop ammunition to attack other Christians or to hurt the local church in any way. And so we would ask that it's just a simple favor. If you are not intending on joining a local church, or if you're not a member of one, turn the program off. We don't want you to listen. This is information you don't need to know. Spiritual gifts are given for the edification of the local church. If you have discernment or are trying to, as Hebrews says, train the powers of your discernment with constant practice and are not a member of a local biblical New Testament church, this is ammunition that can actually be used against the church. Very dangerous that way. We want to be careful to avoid that if at all possible. So just turn off the program and go listen to some pointless crap like the Marcel Driscoll Downfall podcast, whatever. I don't know who those Mike Cosper, I don't know, light in the loafer people are. But if you want some real Christianity, where we're going to tell you what the Bible says and just to heck with the consequences, protestia.com, pulpitandpen.org, and polemicsreport.com. You can check us all out there. If you have a question about how you can know Jesus or find a biblical New Testament church, send me an email, jd@pulpitandpen.org, and I'll get back to you. If it's not an email about that, I'm probably not going to get back to you. Just too busy. But our patrons, I'm going to get back to you because you help keep us on the air and keep us solvent. So thank you so much for all of that. I have with me my producer and co-host from the Denver headquarters, the Denver studio of Pulpit and Pen. His name is something Lieutenant Colonel General something. He's in the Army now. David Morrill.
Yep.
What are you, David? Are you like an E5 or something?
E7, Sergeant First Class. I actually work for a living. It's a little different, you know.
Yeah, and also a business proprietor, as well as working for the Army National Guard. Thank you for your service, David. Thank you for your service, David. We appreciate that. And also, if you could kill some Russians if you get half a chance. In the meantime, what are we talking about on today's program? Because I'm flying by the seat of my pants. So what I did the last 2 days, I took my son on a 12-hour road trip without leaving the state. Imagine that, 12 hours without leaving the state. Reception virtually no way, which is, I'm starting to change my mind on purgatory. If there is a purgatory, it's 12 hours in the woods with no reception. That's got to be the closest thing to purgatory. I felt purged of my sins by the time I got in, and we were able to help a lovely group of people from the land of the north. And then we brought them back, some persecuted Christians who came in perfectly legally, but we wanted to greet them with warmth and hospitality, which is a gift of not a gift, it's a requirement, a characteristic of an elder. And so we're very excited. We have a great potluck plan this Sunday. He's going to be preaching. I don't have to preach this Sunday. I don't know what I'm going to do with my time on Saturday besides, I do have docent research group, write most of my sermons, so my Saturdays are pretty well free anyway, but maybe go shoot something. I don't know. But then we had to drive back. I want you to pray for that family, if you would, though, because they are a long ways from home, in a new country and a new environment in the middle of the sticks, in the middle of nowhere. And I've seen pastor after pastor and non-pastor after non-pastor move to the great rural America in red country, fly over USA, who couldn't take it. It's like, it's how many hours to Walmart? Are you serious? Like what? And not be able to handle the winters. Now, I don't think that in Canada, these folks have such a problem. I think they'll probably fit in fine, but pray for them as there's, I'm sure, struggling. They have to be with homesickness and everything else. Of course, Canada sucks. They probably can't wait to leave, but I'm sure that they have friends and family and loved ones and good people are, they're good Canucks. Is that a pejorative? They're good Canuck, Canadians up there in Canada. And there's no such thing as a pejorative for a Canadian. And just give them prayer if you would. So I am back and freshly back from a long 24 hours in the car with my son, who turns out is crazier than I thought. So I have no idea. I've not been paying attention to the news because I don't have reception. So tell me what's going on in the world, David.
Well, first of all, it can't be a surprise that your son's a little crazy. His dad, if your dad was JD Hall, you would be crazy too. I would just gotta throw that out there.
Yeah, there might be a chance. There might be a chance that.
Bless his heart. That's all I can say about that. Bless his heart.
bless his heart. Yeah.
Well, first of all, the greatest news: the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah, we forgot.
Yeah, we don't want to forget about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Yeah, that is the most important.
That's why we
thing.
Put it in the freeloader portion of the podcast. Freeloaders need Jesus too. So the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ begins with the bad news, and that is you're worthy of hellfire. Now, I know Mr. Rogers told you that you were a little snowflake when you were a child, and that was reinforced in preschool and in kindergarten and in grade school that you're really a good person on the inside. You're just perfect in all of your ways. You might have even gone to Sunday school where it's like, you're just made perfect. You just in every way. You just, even your flaws are happy flaws. It's like Bob Ross, right? Like there's no mistake. There's just happy mistakes.
Happy trees.
Actually, no, what? Huh?
I said happy trees.
These are happy.
That's what Bob
Ross
would always say. They're happy trees.
This accident is a happy tree, is what it is. Listen, afros aside on white guys. The truth of the matter is, you're not born on a collision course, rather an assembly line to heaven, but on a collision course with hell, as I've said for many years. You are not born all right. You are born depraved and wicked, which is why you don't have to teach kids to sin. You don't have to teach children to misbehave. They are little monsters. And it's kind of funny when you talk to Presbyterians about this or Lutherans, they're like, you would consider your babies monsters? Because we treat them as pagans until they're saved and baptized, and then they dunk them straight out of the womb, So they're like, you would consider them pagans? And I'm like, have you met my children? Yes, they're pagans. The act of parenting is really the act of civilizing monsters. They're civilizing the savage. That's what parenting is. So yes, and furthermore, we have not just the sin of Adam on our conscience, but all of the sins that we've committed on a daily basis. How about number one? Let's just stick with one. Usually we go through 4 or 5 commandments in the good person test. We'll do one. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and strength. You're not doing that right now. You're in sin right now. It's like the most important commandment. Jesus said so. It's the greatest commandment. The first greatest commandment, love the Lord thy God with all of thy heart, soul, mind, and strength. You're not doing that this second. There are parts of you that are not fully devoted and fully in love with God. And for that reason, we deserve hellfire. But God, who is great in his mercy and great in his love, sent his son, Jesus Christ, into the world in a hypostatic union, meaning that as an embryo, took on flesh in his divinity. He became an embryo, took on flesh, conceived the Holy Ghost, born of a virgin, grew into a God/man, not half and half, but whole and whole, all in all, man, all God, lived a life you should have lived a life that Adam should have lived for sure. And then he died a death that we deserve. And all of the wrath, anger, hatred, God is capable of all of those. Read your Bible, Joel Osteen. God, all of that wrath and anger from the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God overflowed upon his son on behalf of believers. He propitiated the wrath of God in our behalf so that God could be both just and the justifier of those who believe in him. And for those who believe in him, he took on our wrath and anger and hatred that God has towards our sin, and our sin was laid to his account. Then the opposite occurred. His perfect righteousness was then imputed to our account so that we can have his reward after he took our punishment, proving that his deity was real and his sacrifice was accepted. He rose again from the dead. That's the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you'll probably hear us say some harsh things about some stupid people in today's podcast, but nothing is more important than that message of God's love for his elect and his chosen people to save them when they absolutely could not save themselves. So if you're listening to this program and you think, these guys are full of it, they think they're perfect. No, we think that we're wretched sinners. However, we are saved by a righteous and a holy God. And therefore called to preach his truth. We do not shirk or shrink from teaching the full counsel of God's word, which is not altogether pleasant, hence the name Polemics. This is a polemics program. It is polemical. That means argumentative. It's a different kind of Christianity than what you may be used to, say, if Ned Flanders or Reverend Lovejoy had a podcast. This is a slightly different type of situation we have going on here. But we love the elect of God. We love the church of God. We want to help the church of God. Don't take what you learn here and then beat your pastor with it. There's a rule for how you do it. It's called Matthew chapter 18 from Jesus. And we handle our church gingerly and carefully while trying to correct them along the good path. David, I think that was the good news that you were referencing. Did I leave anything out?
I don't think so. Although I did notice one thing that was interesting when you said, you were saying, polemics is more argumentative and it's not what you may be used to if Ned Flanders is your pastor or something. And I couldn't help, but no, Ned Flanders wears a sweater vest, right? Is he a sweater vest guy?
I believe so.
If he's not,
I haven't seen The Simpsons since I was a kid, but I think so.
If not, he should be. The sweater vest seems like the attire of choice for the gentle and lowly pastor. I think
so because the cotton.
Or if you're James White or Doug Wilson, then you can wear a sweater.
The cotton or the polyester, whatever the sweater is made out of, wool. It expands with the potluck gut that pastors develop over time. So they don't ever have to buy new sweaters.
Right.
Or often they naturally expand with the gut of the pastor who just sits at his desk all day and plays solitaire.
Right. And defends himself against criticism, but basically on
Twitter,
on Twitter ministry. Well, because you said, we have a process for this. It's Matthew 18, and Matthew 18 is a process for if a brother sins against you. But I found the modern phenomenon tends to be if you criticize somebody or you have an objection about something, Matthew 18 cannot be the process, or else you're sinning, Or you see somebody on social media that says, they criticize something a pastor or a thought leader,
It's
whatever you want to call him, says on Twitter, and they say, did you use Matthew 18 first? Did you take this behind closed doors, and did you bring this to Tim Keller in private before you criticized him out in the open?
Who was the author? There was an author. No, it was Robert Gonzalez, Reformed Baptist professor. Gonzalez says, did I take my concerns to this individual about his book privately before I criticized it publicly? No, because he didn't ask me privately before he published it publicly. And I'm like, way to go, Bob. I talked to Bob before my theonomy. I think it was my theonomy debate. Bob Gonzalez, good guy, hardcore Reformed Baptist. But anywho, people don't like criticism. And, it's kind of like Matt Estes posted on Twitter a screen grab of me saying, hey, Tom Buck can win the presidency of the SBC. And somebody's like, oh, yeah, the most polarizing, like you want to pick the most polarizing guy. Who's the most polarizing guy in the Bible, David? Do you think?
The most polarizing guy in the Bible besides Jesus?
No, I would count Jesus.
Yeah, I would still say Jesus was the most polarizing.
Yeah. But you know what? He's not a plagiarist. It doesn't use docent group.
Yep.
Since when did polarizing become a bad thing? Have you read through the book of Acts? Everywhere Paul preached, there was a riot. He would have to be the second most polarizing figure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he'd have to be. He couldn't preach without being run out of town. And what has Tom Buck said that has been that polarizing? Women shouldn't be pastors? Is that it?
That's the biggest thing. Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
And I was going to ask, I assume you haven't heard from him yet on our attempted drafting of Buck 2022.
No, I haven't heard from Tom.
I could make the signs like 5 point.
Hey,
Buck,
I should call him. I
2022.
should call him. Let's call him right now.
Yeah, see if he's around. What he has to say. He seems to be all in for Voddie. So we'll see. But yeah, it's what while you're dialing that up, I would say is it ringing? I can't tell from this side.
It is.
Oh, there it is.
Answer your phone, Tom.
He knows what we're trying to do.
Hello, you've reached my voicemail. If you leave a message, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you so much and have a great day.
At the tone, please record your message. When you've finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
Hey, I would like to speak to the most polarizing man in the Southern Baptist Convention. If you would give me a call back at your convenience. Extra polarizing, please. Thank you.
I'm putting that at the top of the podcast. Yeah, it's well, to get back a little bit on topic. So, I mean, Matthew 18 is about a brother sinning against you. It's not about a public sin, right? I mean, is that your understanding of Matthew 18? If a brother sins against you, so if it's a
public sin or if it's a public error, right, there's no point to the private confrontation.
Yeah. And yet they use that as a sort of a get out of jail free card. Well, he didn't take it to me in private first. I'm like, dude, you put it on the internet. Why would I take it to you? Why would I need to take it to you in private? Everybody knows you sin.
Imagine that you're dressed as a clown, walking around, raping girls, stabbing them to death, robbing banks, and then you're like, how come you didn't bring this to me in private first? You're dressed as a clown, raping and killing people. It's no secret. Everybody knows it's you.
Yep.
I'm not hiding. I'm not sparing you any shame or embarrassment. And that's the goal, is to shame them, to spare them shame and embarrassment. And people are more likely to do the right thing when you approach them privately, when you can reprove them rather than rebuke them. But once it's public, reproving is over. And now we're on to rebuke. And that's a public thing.
Yep. So
I feel like I have to sneeze.
It took 2 years to finally get a sentence for race hoaxer Jussie Smollett. That happened today. Jussie Smollett.
6 months for faking a hate crime. I wonder how much money was spent on that hate crime.
Yeah, he's going to be paying back. I think there's a bunch of court fees and things, but what I was most impressed by was, even though I think the judge might have been hamstrung a little bit with regard to the sentence, I was really impressed by the judge basically called him out, like made him lose it in the court. And I thought it was brilliant. He basically said something along the lines of, people use your name now. They use your name as a way to describe hoaxing and lying about things and racial hoaxes. That's you become synonymous with this. You've lost all your celebrity friends. Your career's probably in the toilet. That's sadly, way worse. And you did it to yourself.
Sadly, there are a number of actual hate crimes in the United States. They're a very small percentage of hate crimes that are legitimate, but there are some legitimate versions of hate crimes, and there are white supremacists. There are black nationalists, but unfortunately, because of this type of incident, people just assume that it's a Jussie Smollett.
Yep.
That's what they assume. And anytime you see a hate crime, like on a gay-friendly church where they write faggot on it or something, you know that they did it themselves. I mean, they caught the kid that was an organist at the church who wrote that there. Or just last week or the week before, there's two water fountains side by side, and somebody wrote white on one and black on the other. And it was a big thing on campus, and they had assemblies, and it was racism is terrible, horrible.
Vigil,
it was probably a black girl who did it.
Yeah, I'm sure they had a vigil.
That's a Smollett situation, or basically Kyle J. Howard's entire Twitter feed.
Yeah. And Smollett was like, after this had happened, he was still claiming he was innocent. And why was he claiming he was innocent? Because in his world of intersectionality and critical race theory that he comes from, he was innocent because even though he technically did something totally illegal and fake and false, it was for the good cause of exposing what's really lying underneath, which is just racism everywhere.
Right. And actually, speaking of capitalism, the reason why these fake hate crimes exist is because the demand for hate exceeds the supply. And the same thing goes for sex abuse in the SBC. So far as the task force is concerned. So like, you have David Sills, who very wrongly, and we should be concerned for his soul, had a 12-year-long affair with a 26-year-old who, by the time the affair was over, was nowhere close to 26. The Baptist press comes out and says, "We're sorry for saying it was consensual." Why is it not consensual? She's 26. A 21-year-old girl is a woman by that point. She knows what she's doing. All right. It's very consensual, but why remove that? It's because the demand for sexism and for misogyny exceeds the supply. So they have to make it up.
Mm-hmm. This is what they did with the police who were involved with George Floyd as well. There was no evidence from that at all that race was a factor, but because the victim, if you want to call him that, was black and there were white officers. There were actually mostly multicultural officers involved, but because there was a white guy involved.
Floyd was a victim. He victimized himself. I mean, anytime you dope yourself up with fentanyl and kill yourself, and then act unruly, he's a victim. He's a self-victim, just like a suicide. I hate the term suicide victim. You're a suicide perpetrator. You're not a victim. If I was king tomorrow, people who commit suicide wouldn't even be allowed to have a funeral. But he was a victim of himself. And every time there's a hands up, don't shoot fraud committed upon the American people, we're overlooking legitimate cases of police brutality, like with Philando Castile or Ashley Babbitt. We're overlooking those instances. Where was the city where the white woman was shot by the black cop? She was a foreign lady. This was like 5 years ago, and he got off scot-free.
Yeah,
she was just like jogging.
There was one.
Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, kinda. But there was one
Beautiful,
close to me,
beautiful lady,
just north of
foreign
where I
lady, and she just somebody called in a disturbance. She happened to be jogging by the residence. He just shot her in what appears to be cold blood. He was probably just trigger happy, but he just killed her. And so there are these legitimate cases of police brutality. I see them all the time. I'm now finding this Saturday, I have an appointment with somebody running against our county sheriff because of police brutality. It happens, but when you fake it, it's no good for the rest of us. And we saw that with the Me Too movement, where everything was sexual aggression, and to the point that nothing was sexual aggression.
Well, and in terms of
with Aziz Ansari, it's like, okay, so some woman gave you oral sex and she didn't really like it that much, and she went home afterwards. That's not rape. That's a bad sexual encounter that she got herself into. That's not rape. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you have people feeling sorry for those like Woody Allen, who are legitimate sexual predators.
Yeah, it's funny to me that the line is always, well, this was a power rape, or because this person was in a position of authority, but every time there is an illicit, and when I say illicit sexual encounter, I mean a sexual encounter outside the bonds of matrimony. Anytime that happens, somebody could be argued to be exercising power, and it might be the female. It could go either way, but nobody claims it's ever power rape when it's like, some Jezebel seduces a guy, which happens. It happens. But we would never claim that, because that
to be perfectly honest, the secretary who has sex with her boss probably gets more out of it than he does.
Right. But nobody ever calls that power rape. Nobody says that was not consensual because she gained more from it than he did. Right. That's ridiculous.
Right.
But for these accusers that want to
Kamala
string
Harris
up pastors,
slept her way to the Kamala Harris slept her way to the top of the of the vice presidency. No, like where are all the Me Too gals on that one?
She is so stupid. I can't believe how stupid she is. I mean, this is a lawyer, right? She's a lawyer. She supposedly speaks for a living.
I've listened,
and she's
to
been a U.S. senator,
her,
and she's. It's like she's trying to be dumber than Joe Biden.
I've listened to some of her talks on the Ukraine, and
so
it's
stupid.
Like, do you know where you're at right now? Like, we ought to pull the 26th Amendment on her, not him, or the 25th.
25th, yeah.
Well, on her more than him.
Yeah, is she trying to see how much the country will tolerate because of her skin color? I mean, I'm curious. It's just like, well, I know I'm not a dumb blonde bimbo, but I can try. So let me get in this press conference with some European leaders and just sort of giggle my way through it.
She's a few chromosomes away from being a dumb blonde bimbo.
Oh my gosh, it is so dumb. Now,
what else are we going to talk about besides dumb people?
Well, probably nothing. This program is full of dumb people talking about dumb people, but we're going to talk about our favorite yellow journalist, Julie Roys, who has published a hit piece, another hit piece on John MacArthur. I don't know what her deal is with MacArthur. I really don't.
This is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say 5 years old.
Older. Keep going.
10 years old.
Older.
15.
Almost there.
20.
There it is. 20 years old.
20 years old. She's digging up something.
Yep.
You and I were in college 20 years ago.
Yep. It's something so old that when I started to do research to verify parts of the story, it was near impossible, even with the internet.
It is so old that when this happened, John MacArthur could still do a pull-up.
Yeah, probably. It was
actually he might still be able to do a pull-up.
This is really it was so old that it was really before the internet really took off as a phenomenon. Certainly before smartphones Yeah, I think
This
I
is when you
had
had
like
to
one of those
dial
little
in and hear that.
one of those little phones with Snake on it. I think I had about the time that this occurred. And yet,
So this is Nokia era.
oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, scandal. So she dug and found some scandal.
Right. And
what is the scandal? What did MacArthur do?
yeah, the scandal is that
because it better be good if it's 20 years old. I mean, it's got to be he raped somebody, he lynched somebody.
No,
if it's 20 years old, it's got to be a good scandal.
Yeah, he publicly by publicly I mean in a communion service apparently. And again, this is if I can take this article at face value, and even if I do take it at face value, you can clearly tell where Roy's is coming from, what her purpose.
Keep in mind, this is the
is
woman who said that he has land not on the beach, but near the beach, and a sprawling 6 acre ranch in Colorado.
Well, she said near the beach, like he lives like near the beach, and he's like 7 miles from the beach or something. It's not close.
Yeah. He is rolling in the dough.
Something about land in Colorado, but it was given to him. He's got land in El Paso County, which is kind of.
But it's not like a big ranch. It's like if you called it a ranch, your neighbors would make fun of you.
Yeah, probably.
You'd be like, that's not a ranch. That's
a
big lawn that you mow.
Yeah. So it looks like as a result of a church discipline, marital abusive maybe situation going on with Grace Community Church members that was handled by some other elders. The resulting video was MacArthur.
Hold on, this is back up for a second.
Yeah.
This isn't even MacArthur in particular. This is the vicariousness of it. This is other elders who handle.
Well, other elders seem to be, from what I can tell from the story, the primary, doing the primary interaction with this married couple. Again, 20 years ago. So who knows? But then the video is of John MacArthur behind the pulpit, basically working the church discipline process, the public, with the whole church, part of the church discipline process.
Basing this off of what it seems to be what he's being told by his other elders.
Yeah, and what he could have possibly known about what was going on. Basically, it's Heinz as a hindsight kind of an issue as far as I can tell, because the husband, who I don't think they could verify he was being abusive, was convicted of actual abuse against his children and is now in prison. He was thrown in prison in 2005 and he's still there.
Okay.
And so she's looking back and saying, well, the church didn't report this as they were supposed to, and they didn't believe the wife. Although, as far as I can tell, she may have at least had some responsibility.
For all we know, there were jurors that didn't believe the wife.
Right. I mean, there were enough that they threw with when she reported it and he was indicted, and I mean, it was enough that he was convicted. I don't know the details of the trial,
which is like 9 out of 12. But for all we know, there were jurors who didn't believe it. So the church. Let's talk worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is 20 years ago, there are some elders at Grace Community Church who took the wrong side of a marital spat, and the guy was a scumbag. The woman, they had some reason to disbelieve, and they sided with the man over the woman. So at the best, now let's presume the worst of their motives, and they are women-hating misogynists. All right, let's assume the worst of their motives. We have no evidence of that. That would be an accusation against elders that I don't have. But let's just assume the worst. This is 20 stinking years old. I am waiting for Julie Royce to find John MacArthur's kindergarten file and how many times he got in trouble in school for not taking his nap or finishing his chocolate milk.
Right. It makes it very, very difficult for anybody reading this report to possibly verify any of this, except for the facts that we know are that the husband is now in prison and that the church was exercising discipline against the wife. That we know. I think I could say is, I could verify factually. Most of these other things are a lot of hearsay, a lot of court testimony, which again was just what somebody said happened. There are some documents that might, and some statements that might corroborate some of this.
What's the deal? Is Julie Royce, she's just the hatchet woman against John MacArthur in a greater culture war within the church. J. Mac is one of the last remaining remnants of conservatism gone by. She wants to ruin him and his legacy. And oddly enough, he is the opposite of a pastor of James MacDonald, who that woman previously brought down, the opposite of James MacDonald. But he is a patriarch. She is a feminist. She told me her views on women haven't changed. LOL. Yeah, they have.
Right.
I've been on Moody Radio. I've been on Up for Debate. I know where she stood on the issues. The Me Too movement. So she's an angry feminist, and I'm sure that on Twitter, chiming in snidely is Karen Swallow Pryor and her wishes.
I haven't seen that yet, but I did find it funny that Julie Roy's had, and I don't know if you saw this while you were fighting your fights recently, she had none other than Kyle J. Howard on a podcast to talk about racial trauma.
I didn't catch the podcast, but I caught that he was on her program to talk about racial trauma.
It was hilarious.
Yeah. Did you listen to the podcast?
I listened to it but I couldn't stop laughing, and so I just turned it off. he's like
and there's not a single one of his stories. Think about it this way. I have never heard one of his stories of racial trauma that have even come close to the realm of substantiated.
Not even close.
It is all anecdotal. There is no evidence for any of it. And this is the woman who's giving credence to a 20-year-old controversy at Grace Community Church.
Right. I mean, I don't think she really understands, among logical thinking evangelicals that do any sort of research at all, how much that damages her credibility. She's going to have Kyle J. Howard on to talk about racial trauma before she goes after John MacArthur. It's like you couldn't write something more ridiculous. And
how to set your career on fire in 30 seconds or less.
She implicates Al Mohler in this article too, because apparently, according to the article, Al Mohler wrote a paper for one of the elders involved in this. Wrote a paper in their defense, and argued that this. According to Roy's article, argued that this elder should be exempt from reporting the abuse based on religious freedom, an argument Mohler said he would not make today. Surprise, surprise. So apparently Mohler said at the time that, well, the church shouldn't be reporting this to the authorities because of religious freedom, which I don't think is an entirely uncompelling argument, but
I'm not a mandatory reporter in the state of Montana. However, we subscribe to what's called the Safe Church Project. And so I treat myself as a mandatory reporter. So if someone is like a kid was molesting his sister, I grabbed him by the ear, took him to the police station. A cop in my congregation acknowledged receiving oral sex by a 13-year-old he met on Tinder. I personally called his CO and told him. So I treat myself as a mandatory reporter, and I explain that clergy penitent privilege ends where sexual abuse begins. And that's just the way that it is. But I'm not obligated by law as a mandatory reporter because of clergy penitent privilege. I mean, some things you just need to get off your chest, and hopefully the pastor can talk you into confessing this, etc. But worst case scenario, the guy had the elders hoodwinked. You don't know that it was misogyny. He might have just been a better con man. The woman,
it seems like
the woman, who knows if she had problems or not, doesn't matter, but they didn't take her side. Again, we don't know why. We don't know if it's misogyny or if he made a more compelling case. No idea. But that's exactly why the church is not the civil magistrate. That's the civil magistrate's job to iron that stuff out to come to conclusions. We don't have an investigative team or forensics. We don't have like a CSI division at Fellowship Baptist Church. So we take it to the law enforcement officers. They don't have CSI either. And they're like Barney Fife, but then they would call the FBI or something. Like They would, call in somebody that can actually
And that seems to be the big crux of the criticism against Grace Community Church and John MacArthur here is that they didn't report it to the authorities. Now, of course, the wife also didn't report it to the authorities.
Keep talking for a minute with that.
Yeah, it's basically the crux of this argument seems to be that the Grace Community Church and or John MacArthur didn't report this to the authorities at the time. Of course, the wife in the situation also didn't report it to the authorities, and once she did, they took action, and that's what resulted in the guy's prosecution and conviction. But it's that combined with again, I mean, she just hates John MacArthur, so anything that can be used to smear John MacArthur, she'll use. And as you read down the article, it's
if
every
he
time
had a runny bowel movement, she would run an article the next day and be like, "What's John MacArthur's diet exactly?"
Yeah,
what is it?
Like she says that
why is he eating that much dairy? Do you know what dairy does to the environment? Those cows pass gas.
Yeah, she's had articles like that about him before. Look how big his house is. I can't believe it. You know, look at his watch. You know, those kind of dumb things.
The part of that dumb article that she did too was like, his house has appreciated $500,000 in value over the last 50 years, and you're like, it's Los Angeles.
Clearly, he's corrupt.
Clearly, he's corrupt because his house is appreciated in value. You stinking nut job. I hope that Julie Roy's, she married, her husband needs to have a parapet on the roof. And I hope he camps out there. As a matter of fact, let's do this, David. Let's research if Julie Royce is married. And if so, let's send him a Coleman tent for his roof.
Okay. I'm sure she's
tell
married.
Cheyenne,
yeah,
tell
I'm
Cheyenne.
Sure.
Cheyenne will get the address and send him a Coleman tent in the mail.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Like, this is just to give you a break. This is it, everybody needs to go out.
We are worried about you. We're worried about your menopause trauma.
Yeah. Twama.
It's very real.
Twama.
Where are all the menopause trauma counselors? That's what I want to know.
Well, and you can see by every fact that's, delivered the way that it is in this article where, I mean, she says one of the pastors here who is doing the marital counseling between this couple has an MDiv from the Master's Seminary, but no professional counseling credentials. Of course, the assumption is if you're pointing out this fact, it must be relevant, even though it's probably not. This is how yellow journalism is done.
That seems kind of how self-contradictory, doesn't it?
Well, it's maybe no professional counseling credentials in terms of how that's normally done, but the fact that this is pointed out makes the reader say, "Oh, that must be a bad thing. That must contribute to this bad narrative."
Churches don't typically offer clinical counseling, and I make my counselees sign a waiver that say, "You understand this is not clinical counseling."
Yeah,
even my addiction counseling, which I was a licensed addiction counselor, I still let them know this is not clinical counseling, and I may refer you to someone else. This is the first stop on your road to recovery, but I may have to refer you to someone with more experience or someone with an advanced degree or someone that can prescribe you meds. It's just the first stop along the journey. And by the way, Julie Roy's is a good microcosm for what we don't want you to be as a listener to Pulpit and Pen. Find any weakness in a ministry and then exploit it until the point that you drag it into the ground. Here's a news flash. Churches aren't perfect. David, your church is not perfect.
True.
My church is not perfect. I know that because I'm in it and I'm not perfect. Although it is the jewel of the prairie and it's one of the finest churches in the world, it's not perfect. No church is perfect. So if you want to use that as a whooping stick, then you go right ahead, but we know what team you're on.
Yeah.
Doug Wilson, I think, has made this mistake once or twice where in terms of setting up young people with courtship and marriage and came on the wrong side of things. We're not claiming infallibility. John MacArthur's not the Pope. He's never claimed infallibility. I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb here and say John MacArthur is not infallible. There, I said it.
Well,
and now I'm disinvited from ShepCon 2023.
Yep.
Not not perfect.
Yep. Were you disinvited from 20? Aren't they doing that right now? When you were disinvited from 2022?
No, I'm no, as a matter of fact, I had called them down there and made sure it was, okay to chill, that I'd be around. But I ended up not going because we couldn't make it work out with some people that we're getting into the country. And so, no, and then I had a bunch of people the last day or two text me, "Are you down here? Are you down here? Are you down here?" So I think I'm still welcome. I'm still welcome, I think.
And they wouldn't, I assume they wouldn't let me go in your stead because I'm not a shep, right?
You are the shepherd of this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like but Voddie was down there, right? Was Voddie speaking, or is he showing up?
Yeah, I heard good things about Voddie's sermon. Yeah.
No, yeah, that's right. I saw a clip. I saw a real strong clip from him, which I'm sure followed a strong sermon.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've had now questions in the pulpit bunker and Twitter and other things like, what do you guys think about this Julie Roy stuff? Even within our own little com box, what do you think about all this Julie Roy stuff? And I would say take it with a grain of salt.
Anytime you come out with
and
dirt,
then some.
First of all, somebody has a vendetta. Take it with a grain of salt. Then when they come out with dirt, ask yourself the question, how closely associated is this dirt with the individual that they're trying to sully? Is it 5 degrees away, 6 degrees away? This seemed to have been several degrees away by the elders. They reported to him as the lead pastor. He is the lead pastor of the church, made a judgment call. It was the wrong judgment call. So Julie Roy says, well, and I think it's safe to say, I mean, if the guy's in prison, they made the wrong judgment call.
Yeah.
So they made the wrong judgment call. It happens. Well, it's church. Nobody's perfect.
And the thing to realize from this is she's using this opportunity not only to smear Grace and John MacArthur, but really to smear the actual biblical process of discipline as well, of church discipline. She really has an issue with that.
Yes.
Because if sinful people, if imperfect people get it wrong, then the whole thing is wrong, right? This is what you see from those that say, well, because the church hurt you or people at the church hurt you, you're well within your rights to abandon the church entirely, right? That's a very common movement in modern evangelicalism. Is I don't even need the church. Besides,
even
it's
if
just
the
a bunch
church
of
is
hypocrites.
wrong, Matthew 18 promises that Jesus is in the midst of them, and apparently Jesus can be in the midst of them and let them get it wrong, which means there must be a purpose in it besides accuracy. And part of that purpose is sanctification. And so when people say, I love this church, I love that church, but I can't get by with this, I say, bring it up at a business meeting at the appropriate time, decently and in order, pray about it for a year, pray the Spirit would lead them to the right conclusions, then bring it up next year. And it may take a decade to steer that ship in the right direction and give the Holy Spirit room to work. You have no idea how much this incident might have caused Grace Community Church to go, you know what, we need to start doing this different. We need to have multiple elders on this, not just one. We need to make sure we're listening to the woman as much as possible. We need to suspect men of the worst possible behavior because we're deserving of it. I mean, we're deserving of, I'm not saying we're guilty until proven innocent, but so who knows how this changed Grace Community Church's process? Sometimes tragedy has to do that. And I'm willing to bet that was left out of Julie Roy's article.
Oh, certainly. And like I said,
I'm willing to bet that she didn't talk to anybody at Grace Community Church.
As I scroll through this, it's amazing how she phrases things to paint the most one-sided view of it possible. I mean, this is in this little passage here, there's a couple that apparently was trying to help the wife or encourage the wife to really reunite with the husband and reconcile and all that, because that's what the Bible teaches.
How dare she?
And but listen to the way that she says this. She says, on April 25th, Eileen, that's the wife's name here. It's in the article, so I'm not giving anything away. Said she received a surprise late night visit from a couple at Grace Community Church, and the gentleman was a student at the Master's Seminary, and his wife came with. And then she writes, in an account for David Gray, that's the husband who's now in prison, David Gray's trial, his ex-wife, now Eileen, wrote that this couple and this gentleman and his wife entered her home at 10:15 p.m. and told her she was in sin because she is separated from her husband. What does it sound like to you when I say this couple entered her home at 10:15 p.m. and started telling her things? Does it not sound like they broke into the house? Like they surprised her? They just came in?
It sounds to me that they were already friends with her, were already familiar with the home, and that this was not an ambush.
It's even worse than that. Later,
that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, later, Royce reveals that
if I go to somebody's house at 10:15, you can better believe I'm their pal.
And she reveals that later, that they were friends. They were invited over. She knew they were coming, but she phrases it this way to make it look like it's some sneaking in the middle of the night kind of thing. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. And Royce, does she even understand how much this undermines any truth that might be in this article? It blows her point out of the water. I don't think she cares. It's just about smearing MacArthur.
She does know, but she doesn't care.
Yeah, I think that's the truth. She does not care.
And this actually makes me respect, to some extent, actual journalism done by, say, for example, Vice, which is terribly liberal, but they actually do real journalism. The New York Post and the Washington Post often do real journalism. And as a journalist, I have an appreciation for that real journalism. And I got to appreciate it. And what Julie Royce does is the definition of yellow journalism. Now, that's a term that's tossed around about a lot, and it's been used towards me. But the guy who, they made the term yellow journalism to disrespect was actually his Pulitzer. You might have heard of him because he printed on yellow paper. But was it David Pulitzer? But anyways, James White will call anything he doesn't like yellow journalism, but this is an actual example of yellow journalism. And when you got to go 20 years back, I'm going to call this a big fat nothing burger with a side of feminism and also a dipping sauce of who gives a crap.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because now, would you argue? Let's take this as a case, and the husband is actually being abusive, abusing the kids, abusing the wife. There is no biblical command for her not to physically separate, right? There's a biblical command not to divorce, but not to, like, if she takes the kids and physically relocates them.
As a church, we have physically separated a couple whose husband was abusive and said, you've got to move away because you're a danger to your wife.
And Grace did this, by the way, in this case.
When that same man got put in prison, I read a letter where he blamed his wife for his predicament. And his wife, by the way, not a pleasant woman, not a Christian woman. And you could hear audible gasps of the congregation mad at him for daring to blame his wife. Then he sent me a letter again blaming his wife, and I took a red pen, marked it out, gave it to the deacon who goes to jail, and said give it back to him. And so I marked out the part about his wife, and I said don't even show up unless you're willing to take full credit and responsibility for that. And people would say, I think, Julianne or Dee or one of the Survivor blog women would say, that old JD, he's a misogynist. I think a lot of us have learned over the years what true misogyny is and are doing our best to try to avoid it. And with everything, there's ditches on both sides of the road where you can beat up your wife just like a child, like R.C. Sproul Jr. spanking his wife. Bad. That'd be bad. But then you have domineering wives over their husband, like Beth Moore, equally as bad. And so we want to be in the middle of the road. And sometimes what I have to remind husbands is, and this is beside the point, I guess, but pastoral advice, your wife is your helpmate. That means that she is your number one counselor in life. That is not lording it over her. That's not you thinking you're better than her. That means that she's more important an advisor to you than your doctor, your lawyer, your attorney, your accountant, your business partner, your secretary. She is your helpmate. She's there to help you. And I know some younger guys who are a little bit chauvinist who are like, you know your place, woman. And it's like, that woman's place is keeping your butt out of trouble. And that is a place of honor and respect. And you need to listen to your wife more than you do.
Yep.
And so let me just say this, husbands, people call me a misogynist. I make jokes about my wife being barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, making me sandwiches, which is not really a joke. That's reality. So, call me a misogynist, but there is no one whose opinion I value more than Mandy J. Broadway Hall. I value her opinion more than anybody else's. And then people are like, I feel so sorry for Mandy. I feel sorry for your wife. You've seen those comments, David.
I've heard it about my wife.
I feel sorry for your wife, what she has to go through. Yeah. If you think I'm tough, meet my wife. She's the titanium in my backbone. She just has it on a nice face and she's a little bit more sympathetic than I am. But don't mess with Mama Bear.
Yep.
And by the way, I would pay for a cage fight to see. I told Janet this on the phone. I'd pay for a cage fight between Janet Medford and Julie Roys. Julie Roys is like the bizarro world evil spawn of Janet Medford. And to this day, Janet Medford is the only woman I have ever tangled with in my life that I regret it. She whooped my butt bad and I deserved it. She was right, I was wrong. She won, I lost. And we developed a friendship over the years because I've been able to recognize that and apologize for it. And Janet Medford would rip Julie Roys into, you remember the show on MTV when we were in college called Celebrity Deathmatch?
Let's get it on.
That would end. That would be a celebrity death match between those two women, and Medford would just rip her in two and then floss her teeth with her spinal column.
Like, it makes me want to learn claymation just so I can make that happen.
Yes.
It'd be pretty good.
If you can put out that video.
And we could have Kyle J. Howard versus Jussie Smollett, for like,
that would be a winner.
Who's the biggest proponent of Twama?
Oh, that would be great. A celebrity death match between Howard and Smollett would be just fantastic.
It would be, or my new favorite candidate for that would be it'd be Kyle J. Howard versus David Bumgardner. The air conditioning kid from the convention floor last year.
I know.
Is he?
I know.
Like, well, I've heard some rumors about who he fancied back in. I'm
calling Tom Buck one more time.
I don't want to be too gossipy about it, but we're working on it. He's right. He's apparently writing at that fake Baptist website, Baptist News Global, which I find hilarious.
Bumgardner is?
Yeah, I find this very funny. They'll take anybody. It's the place to go once you lose your ministry license at your own church.
I need a place to go.
Yeah,
I should start writing for Baptist News Global.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd really appreciate that. Like, you're the Protestia guy. Oh.
Tom Buck is probably like leading a seminar at ShepCon right now.
No, right. He's probably it's 7:52 p.m. at ShepCon right now, so he's probably like behind the pulpit. Like, seriously, why does my phone keep vibrating? It's right now. Your call is vibrating the big wooden MacArthur pulpit.
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
Sweet. Yeah, that would be awesome.
So,
You know that the pulpit is bulletproof and it lowers into the floor.
No, I did not know that. Is that true?
Yeah, MacArthur can climb into it and then it will lower into the floor.
See, I always figured that if there was an active shooter, that he would just whip something out from behind the pulpit and defend himself. But
Yeah, so I ordered a new pulpit from the convicts of the state of Montana, and it'll be bulletproof. And then I'm like, I'm not going to use this because if there's a gunman, like, I'm out from behind the pulpit attacking the gunman. But I suppose if I didn't see him coming, it could come in handy. I don't know. I just think it's cool that convicts are building my pulpit. Well, and they're very excited about it. And I stole Kerry Gordon's pulpit. Have you seen that thing?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, it's huge.
That's a continuationist pulpit if I've ever seen one. It's just massive.
No, it's not. It's like a Presbyterian, old school Presbyterian pulpit.
I just meant like
it's not a charismatic
pulpit. In its size. I mean, there's some extra biblical energy coming out of this pulpit.
Stupid big, but yeah. I like to go big when I go big. Yeah. Oh, by the way, before we get off the program, we are helping Canadian refugees. So if you can send a check to Fellowship Baptist Church and on the info line put Canadians, that'll actually go into our Liberty Defense Fund, but they'll know what it's for in their accounting of the Liberty Defense Fund. And what we're doing is we're using this money to help support the Canadians that we've brought into the country because they don't have jobs, they don't have money, they got frozen assets, all those things. And the refugees from Canada, that's what it's for. Canadians. Write that on the information line. Fellowship Baptist Church, 2181 West Holly Street, Sydney, Montana. Go to the website, fbcsydney.org. I got kind of a reprieve in my lawsuit, thanks to God's providence. So we're using that money to help people who are fleeing religious persecution. If you can help do that, we would appreciate it. 100% of those funds will go. And I mean, I just to be honest with you, I spent $7,000 in the last I've spent $8,000 in the last 3 days helping our Canadian brothers out. So if you can help share the love, that's what that's for. So if you can give above and beyond your patronage, you're like, I don't want to be a patron, but I can support that. Go to the website, fbcsydney.com, click Liberty Defense Fund. But when you write your check, write it to Canadians. If you give online through your phone, there's no way to say, sorry, there's just no way to say what it's for. But if you send a good old fashioned check, you can put Canadians on there.
And remember, fbcsydney.org. Don't go to .com, go to .org. .org.
Yes.
Yep. And it's Sydney, Sidney.
Yeah, like Nebraska, not Australia. We spell things correctly here because we're Americans.
Yeah.
Y'all.
We spell things like we have the guns to back up how our preferred spellings. unlike exactly Australia.
Right. Yeah, I took my son with me on my trip, and I'm like, bring the bullpup. We have a bullpup shotgun. And he's like, why? I'm like, no, why not? 12-hour road trip. Why wouldn't you have a bullpup 12 gauge? It's America, son.
Well, I thought that was hilarious when I came up there to come around to those few stops with you. And you're like, all right, where's the spot in the car for the five rifles I have with me? Like, how can you fire 5 rifles? just in case I have to
remember that. We're transferring my guns to your car. Is that what we were doing?
Yeah. I'm like, is he going to be in a situation where we have to round up a militia real quick? We need to make sure they're armed.
What I want is enough for me to pass out to others.
That's what I was saying.
So that I'm not the only one with a gun.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. My truck is a roaming arsenal.
It looks like that scene in The Matrix when they get, flagged going through the metal detector right before they shoot the whole place up.
That's the hardest part of going to the airport is removing all of my weapons and metal objects and knives, like in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, all right, I forgot this, and there's one in my money clip, and then I got my back pocket, and then
we've definitely strayed off of polemics. So I think
I went to the federal courthouse the other day, and they were worse than TSA. And it's because that courthouse was actually attacked once a few years ago.
Yeah.
And by some tax evaders or something. I don't know what the deal was. But they're looking at my keys, and it's got like a bottle opener, and it doesn't have a knife on it or anything. But they're like, why do you have a handcuff key? And I'm like, why don't you have a handcuff key?
Yeah.
And he's like, I do have a handcuff key. Why do you have a handcuff key? And I'm like, I want a handcuff key. And he's like, fair enough, but you don't get it back.
Really took your handcuff key?
He took my handcuff key.
Come on, you can order that
Little
on the
did you
internet.
know, I had like 4 other handcuff keys on me. So like, I'm not going easy.
Yeah. Well, I like that. When I talked to a police officer, they like chastise you for having something that they have. And you're like,
yes.
You realize your authority as a police officer comes from the citizenry, right? I mean,
when Matt Rosendale was state auditor, I called him because they put down this deer for no reason. It's a long story. And he said, hey, I heard through the grapevine that Game and Fish just bought 80 AR-10s, 308 caliber. Can you verify that for me, Jordan? I said, yeah, I'll call the game warden and ask him. So I called the game warden. I said, hey, Ryan, do you have an AR-10? And he's like, yes. I'm like, why? Well, we got one the other day. We were issued one. There's 73 game wardens and they bought 80. And it was like $200,000 for the game warden. He was the auditor, so he's trying to figure out what's going on. And he's like, why shouldn't I have an AR-10? And I'm like, you're a game warden. Are the deer shooting back? Like, what's the deal? And he's like, well, you have an AR-10. Why shouldn't I have an AR-10? I'm like, if you ever need an AR-10, why don't you call a real cop and let them bring an AR-10? You're a game warden. You need like a single shot 30-06.
We wonder that with
Tops.
between municipal police and military, because after the Army and Marines and things like that they were basically donating decommissioned military equipment to local police departments. So you wind up with municipal cops with tanks and rocket launchers and stuff.
They gave the city of Billings 2 former Vietnam era attack helicopters that were to be used for search and rescue. And I'm like, search and rescue. Okay.
Search and destroy is more like it.
They gave they gave Bearcats. But this is a conversation that is worth having because for example, down in Texas, they wanted to do a stakeout on this house. So they went next door and they're like, we want to do a stakeout. And the family was like, no. And they kicked the family out and took over the house. Well, the Constitution says you shall not be forced to harbor the military against your wishes. And the police it went to court. The police department's argument was, we're not military, we're police. And the homeowner's argument was, you're militarized police. I don't remember how it turned out, but we should stop militarizing police. I think the first thing we do, this is going to be the most controversial thing I see on the program. I apologize to you in advance, Officer Boomy. I think we should make them wear pink so that they are less aggressive, or a neutral color, right? No military fatigues. You don't need those. You don't need military fatigues. You need a quick response team, maybe with military fatigues. You don't need them as a beat cop. Keep your sidearm or whatever, but you don't need to appear military. And I always thought it was funny that when I went overseas, the police cars were always like Geo Metros. And now we have the most intimidating police cars. We've got Dodge Chargers and Challengers, and
they look like
souped up
Transformer.
Explorers. Yeah. And I didn't know why
Batmobiles.
until I had to read it. That's an intentional part of other countries so that they don't scare the populace. They give the police the least intimidating vehicles possible, so as to not scare or intimidate the so-called civilians, which is another bee in my bonnet, because I hate it when police call citizens civilians. I can't stand it, because civilian means non-military. So if you're a cop and you're using the term civilians to refer to people like me, that means you must think you're military, and you're not military. You are a civilian peace officer. So you're a civilian. You're a civilian peace officer, and that's different than being military. So if you're going to act like militarized police, then I think that we ought to. Where is it in the Constitution, David, where it says that the United States military will not be used on domestic soil?
Well, there's, I mean, we're talking the
outside of a military base.
Yeah, I mean, the Quartering Act and that kind of thing is about, not being required to have to keep military in your homes. Like they can't, requisition your home for staying in. As far as, I mean, there's another part of U.S. code that talks specifically about the military not being used on the citizenry. And that's what you're referring to, but I don't remember what it is.
Right, which was a deal when Obama drone striked an American citizen. But
yeah,
I think we have unfortunately run out of room for our patron, our non-patron freeloader podcast. Thank you for listening. We will be back with you Tuesday, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. You'll get that on Wednesday. Signing out to the non-freeloaders, or to the freeloaders, David Morrill, J.D. Hall. God bless you. Don't forget to give to the Canadians. We could use it. We're going to pass it out and get it to where it needs to go. God bless you all, and sign up for Patreon so you can keep on listening. Now, we'll talk to you later. Until then, as always, tell somebody about Jesus, repent of your sins, and believe the gospel. Be baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. God bless you.